In 2020 and 2021, when Buhler Mennonite Church did not worship in person, but via video, Buhler Mennonite Church member Peter Buhler produced the video opener depicting Buhler Mennonite Church's mission statement outlined in the 2008 Constitution. The video opened and closed each of the many video worship services as a reminder of what it means to be the church. While each point illustrates a key part of Buhler Mennonite Church's 100-year ministry, the church is well known for its focus on alleviating pain and suffering in the world around us, and thereby testifying to the love and salvation of Jesus Christ. This was evident from its beginning that alleviating pain and suffering was central to being a church. The original German handwritten minutes detail the process of developing the first church constitution. At a congregational meeting on January 28, 1920, 11 months before Buhler Mennonite Church became independent, it was resolved that, quote, the word deacon be dropped and Armenpfleger be put in its place. End of quote. Armen can be translated into English as poor or needy, and Pfleger can be translated as guardian. Therefore, it was resolved that instead of referring to these ministers as deacons, they were given the superhero-esque title of the guardians of the poor and needy. This change may seem like a semantic quiddity, but it clearly signaled the central importance of alleviating pain and suffering in the world around them. Although Buhler Mennonite Church has shifted back to using the word deacon instead of guardians of the poor and needy, the distinct emphasis has remained. To this day, the ministry of alleviating pain and suffering has benefited people across the street and around the world. 3 days after becoming an independent church, it was reported at a December 30th, 1920 congregational meeting that the infant church had dispersed $2,244.87 to alleviate pain and suffering and to share the love and salvation of Jesus Christ. Of that amount, $885.48 was donated to, quote, the needy in Germany, and $223.32 was donated to the, quote, needy in Russia, and $25 was donated to, quote, the orphans in India. Although Mennonite Central Committee is not mentioned by name as the church agency that received these funds and facilitated the relief work in Germany and Russia, it can safely be assumed that it was. Mennonite Central Committee was founded on September 17, 1920, in response to the needs and horrors of World War I and the Russian Revolution. MCC and Buhler Mennonite Church are essentially twins by age in the ministry of alleviating pain and suffering in the world. Through the 1920s and 30s and 40s and even into the 70s, Buhler Mennonite Church collected clothing for MCC to be shipped to people all around the world. The guardians of the poor and needy kept busy. Supporting the ministry of MCC is still at the heart of the Buhler Mennonite Church ministry. In 2020, Buhler Mennonite Church was gifted a framed flour sack saved by longtime Buhler Mennonite Church leader Albert Becker. These bags, manufactured by the Hutchinson Bag Company, filled with hard wheat flour contributed by the Mennonite churches of the Buhler and Inman communities, and milled by Buhler Mill and Elevator Company. They were sent to post-World War II Europe to help feed hungry refugees in the late 1940s. This act would be repeated throughout the following decades, and as late as 1999, local grain was bagged by local farmers and shipped to North Korea by MCC. The MCC Relief Sale and MCC Meat Canning, MCC Thrift Shops, and other MCC projects appeared and continue to dominate Buhler Mennonite Church's ministry landscape. In 1951, the Buhler Mennonite Church's Men's Fellowship was established and led by Herb Regier. The purpose of this organization was to, quote, draw men into a more intimate fellowship so as to develop spiritual strength for Christian service, end of quote. Besides working on local congregational projects, this group helped serve at Camp Menasca men's retreats and joined Mennonite Disaster Service in helping out after natural disasters like floods and tornadoes. In 1975, the Men's Fellowship was replaced by the Men's Action Committee. Men were selected from adult Sunday school classes and were responsible for coordinating the men's service programs. The Men's Action Committee was active until 1978. In 1955, the Women's Missionary Association, later changed to Women's Missionary Organization of the General Conference Mennonite Church, was formed to promote knowledge of missions and to secure contributions for mission and relief purposes, encouraging women to share and to serve. At that time, Buhler Mennonite Church already had 113 members in 5 societies. Each was a separate organization with their own name, electing an executive committee to oversee their projects. The societies had names like the Senior Society, Willing Workers, Friendly Circle, Mission Helpers, and Fellowship Workers. Every fall, the women's societies held a mission supper with a sale and a bazaar which were very well supported. Marie Wall recalled that, quote, the elderly women of the church peeled potatoes for mashed potatoes for hours to prepare for the mission suppers and sales, end of quote. The last mission supper and auction was held in 1973. Each mission society had many service projects. They often served at funerals and auctions, made school bags for France, took food to Pleasant View Home, rolled bandages for MCC, made quilts for the mission auctions and relief sales, visited the elderly, baked for the MCC relief sale, and volunteered at the etc. shops in Hutchinson and Newton. In 1976, the Dorcas Society was organized with Rachel Senner selected as the first president. This group met in the evening to accommodate women who worked during the day. But, as times do, the times changed, and the 1989 yearbook stated, quote, it seems as though the sewing circles as we know them and the WMO have outlived their usefulness. They no longer seem to fit our present-day schedules. End of quote. At the January 15, 1989 annual congregational meeting of the Buhler Mennonite Church, the president of the Buhler Mennonite Church's Women's Missionary Organization, Hilda Voth, made the following recommendation into a motion. Quote, I recommend to the Buhler Mennonite Church congregation that permission be given to the Women's Missionary Organization to dissolve. End of quote. Hilda Ediger seconded the motion and the congregation passed the motion, after which much appreciation was expressed to the WMO for all their years of service in the past. The Dorcas Society remained in action only 1 year longer, until January of 1990. The women's mission societies provided the backbone for serving people across the street and around the world. But since the mission societies were no longer active, separate committees were set up to continue some of the more popular projects. Such a project was the annual Noodle Soup Supper, which is presently still a key Buhler Mennonite Church activity. The first Noodle Soup Supper was hosted in 1969. In 1972, the Noodle Soup Supper raised $612. By 1987, donations increased to $3,207. Each year, the Noodle Soup Committee separates the egg yolks from the whites. The yolks are used to make the dough for noodles. The Friday before the soup supper, church members gather and make the noodles. A key piece of machinery is the mechanized pizza dough roller, used to roll out the noodle dough before it's put through the noodle machines. The noodles are placed on tables in the basement to dry. The noodle making usually culminates in time for a noon meal of delicious homemade Kampsbarscht. Then on the morning of the second Wednesday of each February, the soup is made in the church basement. Chicken meat and broth donated by church members is added. An important role in soup making are the soup tasters. It can't be too salty or not salty enough. It has to be perfect. Church members also donate homemade pies and bread. And at 5 p.m., people from all over the area are ushered into the church basement and seated at many rows of tables. Soup is served until 7 p.m. It is a wonderful time of hospitality and fellowship. Based on committee records, since 1977, the annual Noodle Soup Supper has served an average of 570 people per event, with the most people served in a year being in 1995 when they served 699 people. One year, the supper was postponed due to weather, and in 2021, the format was changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. That year, people placed their orders a week before the noodles were made, and then on soup day they drove through the overhang by the church, and their soup, pies, and bread were brought to their cars. The changed format was a success as 526 servings were handed out, and a total of $8,367 was raised for Victory Village and the Buhler Emergency Aid Fund. Since 2005, the Noodle Soup Supper has raised and distributed over $94,800 for missions. Missions like Mennonite Central Committee, Victory Village, Buhler Omega House Project, Buhler Emergency Fund, Mennonite Disaster Service, Sunshine Meadows Retirement Community, the Hopi Mission School, Western District Conference, Pleasant View Home, and Hutchinson Oxford Houses. The Noodle Soup Supper has been well supported by the larger Buhler community and been a blessing to many near and far. Since 1968, a good number of Buhler Mennonite Church men have used their voices to alleviate pain and suffering by singing under the motto, "We sing so that others may live," because offerings taken at the Kansas Mennonite Men's Chorus concerts are donated to the Mennonite Central Committee. Over the years, Kansas Mennonite Men's Chorus has donated over $600,000 to MCC. The choir once boasted over 500 active singers, and in recent years has topped 300 singers. It's incredible to hear 300 men singing at the tops of their lungs, and perhaps even more incredible to hear 300 men singing quietly. At present, the director is Greg Bontrager, who also is the choir director at the Buhler High School. Bontrager is quoted as saying, quote, "The men's choir started because of the MCC relief sale. Some guys decided they wanted to sing together, and they just kept on doing it. It's just definitely a unique experience. You don't see this many men singing together very often." End of quote. A relatively new activity related to Buhler Mennonite Church's alleviation of pain and suffering ministry was the introduction of the outreach meal packaging events. Introduced to the church by Buhler Mennonite Church college student Holly Croker in 2013, the annual outreach meal event gathers between 150 and 200 church members and area community members to package an impressive amount of protein-enriched meals to combat hunger both domestically and internationally. At first, the meals were packaged in the Buhler Mennonite Church basement in the span of one morning. The first year of packaging, they packaged 2,000 meals. In 2020, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, domestic food bank demand was high, and many banks were experiencing food shortages. outreach program set a goal to, in the span of 1 month, package 1 million meals nationwide. Buhler Mennonite Church, in partnership with Buhler's local internet company IdeaTech, hosted an event in Hutchinson with the ambitious goal of packaging 50,000 meals of the overall 1 million meal goal. The 50,000 meals were packaged under 5 hours by 200 volunteers. 5,000 of those meals were donated to the Buhler Community and Reno County food banks. The overall goal of 1 million meals was accomplished. The slight shift in semantics of the first Buhler Mennonite Church Constitution from deacon to guardian of the poor and needy left an indelible mark on the trajectory of the church's ministry. After 100 years of ministry, Buhler Mennonite Church not only talks about alleviating pain and suffering in the world, but more importantly acts on that commitment, and by doing so continues to boldly testify to the love and the salvation of Jesus Christ. And when the time comes, may our Buhler Mennonite Church story match that of Jesus' story in the Gospel of Matthew, when he says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' And then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you?' And then the king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'"